All right.
So the album we're talking about, here we go already. So the album we're talking about So the album we're talking about in this episode is called So. So I guess we should get on with it. So without further ado, welcome friends to the 3324 podcast, the home base. This is like Hoth for music and movie podcasting. We're hiding from the big podcasts. And we're the small one on the ice planet of Hoth, doing our weekly podcast, right?
You know what? That's a great. I'm glad you said Hoth instead of Yavin or somewhere hot or Tatooine because it's freaking hot as hell. So yeah, thank you for that. I'm just imagining.
In the winter, you're gonna want me to say Tatooine.
Of course, or Yavin, one of these like.
But you know what?
Humid.
There's enough activity on. There's enough activity on Tatooine for now.
That's true.
We don't need to. We need a Hoth series from Disney Plus.
Oh. So how are you, my friend? How was your?
Well, how's things?
Yeah, good. Very good. Yeah.
Good.
So
and back. Welcome everybody to the 3324 podcast. If it's your first time here, well, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. There's a ton of old stuff that you can go through. So nothing better than finding something you like and then being able to dig back further into it. And kind of see what other things we've got there. So by all means, have at it. It's all free. It's as silly as this episode is going to be as well. So we try and remain consistent. Find us on social media if you like. You can find us there, 3324 Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. That's awesome. If you're listening to the podcast, well, go ahead and give us a rating too. That'd be pretty neat. Spotify allows you to give some stars, which is kind of cool. We always recommend 5 for some reason. We just like the number 5 because there are 5 stars. So there you go. If they go to 10, we'll say we like the number 10.
We set the bar high. Just admit it. We just set the bar high.
We set the bar high for our listeners. We expect them to give us 5s. We deliver what we deliver.
Does it deserve 5? That's another story. No, I think it deserves. Well, certainly it does. It don't. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would never say anything less about it.
Everything is heartfelt. It all comes from in here. So
and even a tear or two.
Yeah. Well,
sometimes maybe even on this episode. Could be right for you.
Well, for me, sure. Okay, no, that's a given.
This album ties into a lot of our other episodes too. There's a lot of
does. Yes, it's been mentioned before. Yep.
Yeah. So there may be some callbacks to some previous episodes where from Eric's point of view and from Eric's side, this figures heavy into a lot of the top 5s that we've done and some of the other subjects we've covered. So we are talking about Peter Gabriel's album So, which I didn't actually say in the open, but that's who it is. It's Peter Gabriel's solo album. It's his 5th album. Let's get to the stats, and we'll get a jump right in on this album.
Alrighty,
we're gonna do it. We're diving in. Released in May 1986, produced by Peter Gabriel and Daniel Lanois.
That's is that the correct way to pronounce it?
Yeah, it's not Lanois. It's not Lanois or Lanois.
I've heard some people pronounce it that way, and I know he's French Canadian, so I'm just going to go for the Lanois. So there you go.
Yeah, we're sophisticated here.
That's right.
we put the flourish on those interesting last names. So it's Daniel Lanois.
Lanois.
And if you're asking, it's Lanois. Kind of like Illinois. You don't say Illinois, you say Illinois. It's silent. So Lanois. That's right. So there we go. There were 4 singles released from this album. Sledgehammer went to number 1, Gabriel's only number 1 hit. And in a weird, we're gonna start with the trivia right away. In a weird kismet or karma circumstance, its appearance at number 1 knocked off former bandmates Genesis out of their only number 1 single with Invisible Touch.
That's right. So the same year, that album. Yep.
Yeah. So Peter Gabriel not only left Genesis, he also gave him a little black eye on the way out on the Billboard charts of supplanting them for their only number 1.
I'm going to just throw it out there. Full disclosure. This album blows Invisible Touch away, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I love Genesis.
It'll be an interesting
I love the
contrast.
band.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I think there's an interesting contrast there
Mhm.
because we'll get into a little Genesis history, but if you're with us, you probably know. But we'll talk a little bit about that, and that there's kind of a parallel careers going on or parallel
Mhm.
trajectories that actually ended up meeting at number one. Oddly enough, the second single was "In Your Eyes," which hit number 26. "Don't Give Up" hit number 72. "Big Time" hit number 8. Actually, that was 5 singles then. One, two, three, four, 5 singles out of
Yeah.
8 songs on this album. Sorry. "Big Time" hit number 8. "Red Rain"
And Red Rain. Yeah. That was
didn't
the
really
last.
chart, but it was on the Hot 100 chart, but it didn't really. I couldn't find where it was on the Hot 100, but it was on some other adult
Yeah.
contemporary charts as
Mhm.
well. It hit number 2 on the Billboard album charts, 5 times platinum. Genesis was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010 with Peter Gabriel,
Mhm.
but he was not available to make the trip to New York or wherever they had the ceremony, so he didn't make that one. Said at some point, I'll get another chance and I'll be there. And in 2014, he was inducted as a solo artist, and he
Yeah.
made that show. He made that performance.
Of course he made that one. I would hope so.
He better make that one.
Right.
And
Yeah.
not because there's any animosity between him and the members of Genesis.
Oh, absolutely
We don't
not.
want to
No.
portray that.
Right.
But there is a little. Let's kind of pick that up. We'll kind of go right there.
Okay.
Just a little bit about Genesis Land. He was the lead singer for Genesis, which really during his tenure was he's like the crown prince of Prague.
Prague. Absolutely.
Honestly,
Yeah.
like he's like the poster boy for everything that Prague was because of the costumes, like the storytelling. He went full, like he dove full in on that whole genre and was really beloved for it, even though Genesis during that incarnation wasn't extremely popular, right?
Well, they had a very, very particular following. People kind of thought of it as actual religious experience when they would go to see their shows. Yeah, he'd come out in these weird costumes, and the music reflected what he was singing about. So he was very theatrical with his presentation and that kind of thing. But the musicianship of the band, I might add, really they kind of went in hand. It was just they were so really intricate.
Wait, hand in hand.
There you go. Oh, that's that. Well, yeah, that
Phil
was
Collins reference.
Yeah, we talked about that at face value. So there's one reference already. See, we're going digging back. It was their music was the melodies were strong. They weren't like the other prog bands of the day. They were just hard and heavy, and some of them were just loud and trying to like play over one another. Genesis always had a knack for playing with each other in the songwriting and really respecting that aspect of the music. So it really showed. And then of course they had their creative differences over time, and then of course the last album that they did with him was their only double album, which was The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is this real esoteric.
Oh, a prog double concept album.
That's right. Yeah,
that's like the triple whammy for like prog fans.
And when I say double album, we're talking a lot of tracks. This is not some double albums are only like 8, maybe 10 songs back in the day. That was a lot. But here we're talking almost 20 songs, and that's for 1974, that's big. That's huge. And Gabriel, the whole story is like they all came together, and they would write the music in one room. Gabriel would go off in another room and write the lyrics, and it just didn't quite match. Like the lyrics were so like the concept was just above everybody in the band. Phil, of course, was having a great time because he's just sitting behind the drum kit.
Yeah, just playing.
Smoking his weed.
Phil Collins was, to kind of cement that, Phil Collins was only, and it's going to sound weird to say that, was only the drummer in Genesis at this point. He was anything, not even considered like he was not a founding member either. So he was kind of, certainly a part of the group, but not the Phil Collins that we would come to know in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Totally. He was a member of Peter Gabriel's group, as it were, because Gabriel really with the foxtrot, with the fox head and all the different costumes, he took all the attention.
You hit it right in the head, and the band even admitted that it was like they were getting kind of tired of being like
they're almost performers
Gabriel's
behind
band.
him. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So creative differences. So it was time. He had a lot of personal stuff going on. He had like all these, like he was like one of these creative artists that we always talk about, like Pete Townsend, who was always thinking, looking over the fence, trying to do something different, wasn't content to just do one thing. And at this point, it was time for him to just fly the coop. And he was already thinking about, I see a lot of what's going on in the Lamb in the solo work. Like, some of the concepts are heavier. Some of them are even more, dare I say it, but slightly more new wave pop, punk. Because it was like, it's just a concept that is just, I'm still trying to figure this album out. I love it, but it's just, to this day, I have no idea what the hell's going on, but it's some great stuff on there.
Yeah.
So anyway,
during that tour, in 1975, I think at the beginning of the tour, he had pretty much decided at that point that he was done. That he was done with this. Again, not necessarily. I mean, some of they're not Beatles animosity, but there was some growing tensions there. And like you said, he was having some personal issues with his wife. I think was ill, or
his daughter.
His daughter was ill. So that's weighing heavily on his mind. So he announces to them, say, "Listen, guys, at the end of this tour, I'm done." That would lead to, just to close out the Genesis portion of it, that would lead to a search for a new singer. Up to 400 people were auditioned, and there was no one better than the guy that was sitting behind the drums. Phil Collins was able to emulate Peter Gabriel enough while still being Phil Collins, and we'll catch up with Genesis a little bit later on with Sledgehammer.
One more little fact, and what's probably not known is Phil actually did some singing. He did sing a couple of lead on a couple of tracks, rather. I'm sorry, but he also sang backup. So anytime there was any kind of harmonies going on, that's Phil. That's Phil and Peter Gabriel together. It's Peter Gabriel. They never tracked Peter Gabriel's voice like doubled, or he's harmonizing with himself. Anytime you heard those harmonies, that's Phil Collins in the background.
There you go.
Just a little fun fact there, in case you didn't know. But there you go.
There you go. Working on his vocal chops for the time he was going to dethrone Gabriel. So Peter Gabriel goes off and decides, at some point, or he leaves in 75. His first solo album comes out in 77. Peter Gabriel would release four solo albums, all of them called Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, he thought his idea was, when you buy a magazine, it just says like Life magazine, and the picture's different, right? So he was looking at his solo work as each year you get a new Peter Gabriel.
It's a body of work.
And we'll just call it Peter Gabriel. But the fans weren't content with that. They needed some type of delineation. So the first one they called Car, because he was in a car. Second one they called Scratch, because of the photo of his kind of like scratching the front of the album.
Yeah.
Melt, which is probably one of his most famous album covers, where half of his face is melting. I think they did that with a Polaroid camera. And then the final one, I think the United States said, we're not releasing this unless you give it a title. Like, we're not going to put it out just as Peter Gabriel again. Like, we're done with this. Like, stop. So they did kind of, tacitly, I think Peter Gabriel suggested the Security, but he still was against it. It was not what he was looking to do with those albums. But they said in America, we need a title.
Yeah, I think the Atlantic Records, which Charisma is the British label, Atlantic at this point was handling the American release. After Melt came out, they refused to, they didn't know what to do with his stuff. Like when that album came out, like Games Without Frontiers, they were just like, we can't market this. We don't know what to do with this. So they refused to release it. And that's when he made the switch over to Geffen. And it was Geffen who actually decided to put the album out with the title Security. And they didn't tell him. Like he knew that this was happening. Like they were talking about doing that, but they did it without his consent. Yeah. I think they just released it as Security, and that was that
and that came out in 82.
Yeah.
There is a story about Security. Do you remember this?
No? Refresh my memory.
I'm about
several stories.
we're going to part the sands of time on this one. We're going deep.
Yeah.
So there, we used to go to all, me, Eric, and our friend Johnny would just go to the record, just troll the record store, just kind of looking for cassettes.
Yeah.
we were kind of getting big into imports and finding stuff that wasn't available, yada, yada, yada. 82, 83 CDs weren't necessarily the thing yet. So it was kind of cassettes and albums. So we went to this place called Record Town in Yonkers, New York on Central Avenue.
Yeah.
And they used to keep the cassette. A lot of places before they came out with those plastic cases, the security cases, they used to keep like the cassettes in like a glass locked case. So that you'd have to get the dude over, unlock the case so you can look at the cassette or see what you wanted.
Yeah.
And you were, at that time, you were into Phil Collins, you were into Genesis, and you were into Peter Gabriel. And it was definitely you and I, and maybe Johnny, and we go into Record Town, and we were looking for stuff. And I said to you, I was standing in front of the cassette case, and I said to you, I'm gonna check or look for security, the tape.
Okay.
And the worker walks over. You better not try nothing, man. Like I was checking security. Like I was like gonna like rob the joint or like steal the cassettes. He's like, you better not try nothing, man. I'm like,
that's right. Yes.
Dude, shut the F up. I want to look at the cassette, you bozo.
Oh man, yeah, that's right. I forgot. Yes. Okay.
You remember
right.
that?
I do. You stumped me, man. I'm usually the one to remember all these little stories. Wow, you finally got one. Got me.
So that dates back to what, 82, 83, right? Yeah. So that dates you back to getting into this. For me, it was always for me, Gabriel, like you said, with the record label, didn't know what to do with it. For me, that I always kept Gabriel at arm's length because
you were like, I
because it was so like I didn't know, like it was because it was kind of creepy, and it was like it was very esoteric, and I had more pop leanings. Not that I didn't listen to that kind of stuff. I certainly was listening to Genesis, but the Gabriel stuff I always was just kind of like. Not like even Shock the Monkey was a little bit more tuneful, but it was still kind of, the videos were creepy. He just had like this weird, like this whole thing was just kind of like odd. Like for me, it was always kind of like this odd thing that I was kind of like, because he's wearing suits, but then he's running around and looking menacingly in the camera. And I was like,
always in the videos, he's got like his creepy makeup on, and exactly.
And like you said, Games Without Frontiers. I mean, they're strange. They're strange songs. So I was kind of like,
here's the thing. Full disclosure, you recall the Oleant in White Plains? Remember that little shop? I remember buying. That was when
which is basically like a head shop. It had tie dye and posters.
Exactly. You walk in there, the smell of incense just hits you like as soon as you walk through the door. But yeah, all the T-shirts and the pins, and remember the pins in the glass case, and all the rock T-shirts, and of course there's Zeppelin, there's the Who, there's the Stones, there's all the famous like the big iconic like images,
tour
like
shirts. You could get the tour shirts
like the Stones with the lips and the famous lips and the tongue. And what do I buy? I buy the cover, black T-shirt with the cover of Melt. and it just said Peter Gabriel, and it was just that cover, like it was half his face melting, and I put it on, and you guys looked at me like, what the,
and I'm sure the guy probably said, we finally sold one. Don't reorder any, but we did sell one.
Here's the thing. I this stuff to me, like, I didn't love every moment. Okay. Yeah. Like I didn't like love every song at that period, but it was definitely a cult thing. He was
very artsy.
He was very labeled as a cult artist at this point, and
absolutely
he was building on every album. Like with each progression, he would get better and better and try to fine tune what he was doing. I enjoyed Melt because I simply liked the personnel on it. Mm-hmm. Phil played on it. You had Robert Fripp from King Crimson was like Kate Bush. So these names just kind of, I knew, so it was cool for me. He was
surrounding himself with great supporting characters, and he would maximize that on So.
Yeah.
So his last Peter Gabriel album comes out in 82. And at that point, and we've talked about this in the Rush episode, and I think we talked about it in another episode. These artists start to say, you know what, let me try and still continue what I'm doing, but make them short, make the song shorter, mm-hmm. and make them a little more snappier. Rush did that, right? That was their thing with moving pictures is we want to do prog, but we don't want to do 20-minute prog. We could get the same point across in 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And with So, he kind of really embraced that aesthetic as well, to kind of very much Peter Gabriel, but then very much something else. And also, I think what separates this album And you kind of say that you hate this a lot. I'm going to kind of call you to the carpet, and maybe you can explain yourself on this one.
Okay.
Because we talk a lot about the 80s sheen on production, and this very much has, but in a good way. This very much has a very bright and open production style that you don't hear on his previous albums, which also separates the previous 4 solo albums from So.
You're absolutely right. But the thing about the set, what gets me is, he uses keyboards, synthesizers, and gravitates to, yes, it's a very, I want to say polished sound, but also but to great effect. I mean, you hear every instrument. It's not this overall wall of sheen that made the stuff sound compressed, like a lot of rock bands were doing that, like Def Leppard, for example. Like, I never liked the way their albums sounded, because they always had that very compressed sound. Well, the sound was like, it felt like it was in like a bubble to me. Like, imagine that, like there's like a skin, like, if you will, like over the sound, and you could feel that. With this album, it was more open. It was a lot of that kind of stuff, the tools of the day, the toys of the day, the synthesizer, but you had a lot of analog instruments layered on top of that, which gave it this bottom end that you don't normally hear in a lot of 80s pop music, which I've mentioned this before several times. Like, I love that bass. I love that bottom end. But there is
you got it galore here, courtesy of Tony Levin for the most part. There are a lot of there's a lot of performers on this album, but Tony Levin would be one of his stalwart standbys that he would kind of recruit, and formerly of King Crimson, or go back and forth to whatever. And that's what this album is kind of funk, beats, bass, and world music. Like, those are the 4 things I kind of really, and then maybe a 5th adjective might be atmospheric also, because there are those some of those songs that really are kind of atmospheric and like you said, using like the Fairlight computer, which was a big tool at the time early on. Sampling. Peter Gabriel took in his break between leaving Genesis and starting his solo career. He took piano lessons, so he did learn how to play music. So he was becoming an adept, not only a songwriter but a composer. And you kind of feel that here. This album, I really like this album, and I said to Eric just before we went on, I said, should I tell you now? And he's like, what? I said, I'll wait. And he goes, what? You didn't like the album? You don't like it? I said, no. I said, honestly, I've never listened to it until we did this show.
Yeah.
I've never listened to it in full. Because I said, I'd always kept Gabriel. I knew all the popular stuff, but it always kind of kept him at arm's distance. And I'm sad I didn't. I did with this album. Yeah. Because I really, in listening to this album, I already knew 5 out of the 8 songs. So I was already there, and it's not like there's not a great leap to the other one. So if you're already familiar with the songs we talked about in the beginning, listen to the rest of this album, because you're not going to go wrong. Right. You're not going to go wrong. And then part of that is Daniel Lanois. We need to talk about him as a producer, because he was very much
see that big time. There you go.
Big time.
Big time. I'm getting better.
He was during this time, he was producer extraordinaire. He was very much in demand. He was working, he worked with Peter Gabriel. Then he went to work with U2 on the Joshua Tree. So he was kind of doing that. He was kind of one of those guys that was kind of like all of a sudden you just see his name on like all these different credits. So he was working with Gabriel first, and then he started working with Robbie Robertson on Robbie Robertson's solo album. Had to leave to work with U2 to kind of do some work on the Joshua Tree, and Daniel Lanois calls Robbie Robertson over and says, "Hey, come to Ireland, come here." So Robbie Robertson goes out there because he's still working on material. He ends up recording a song with U2. He then flies to England and seeks out Peter Gabriel, because he really loved the keyboard work that he did on this album, and he sought out Peter Gabriel to work with on a song called "Fallen Angel." Which is now, when I listen to this album and I hear like "Don't Give Up" and like the beginning of "Mercy Street," I directly hear that influence. I'm like, the Robbie Robertson opening
"Fallen Angel"
fits right in with this, and Gabriel sings on that. But that whole atmospheric quality of that song fits in with this album. Like,
No
Like
doubt. Yeah.
right there, yeah. The influence is obvious that Peter Gabriel was a big influence on that
That's the
song
cool thing about,
because of
like,
this.
not to get, too completely off the track,
Yeah.
but to comment about Robbie Robertson, it's the great thing about him. He's always had a great ear for who was doing what at the time. So his music kind of reflects who the artist, that he likes at that particular time. So yeah, all of these people are on that album, the Bodines, Peter Gabriel, U2, and they've all been, most of these people have been produced by Daniel Lanois in one form or another. So that all came together, and you could definitely hear the similarities
Yeah,
to,
you could hear it bleeding
stuff.
in. So when I was
Yeah.
listening to this album and hearing some of these songs, I'm like, oh wow, I absolutely hear that. And
Yeah.
Daniel Lanois was the connecting tissue, as it were.
It's
Of
interesting to note that Lanois like worked with some really great people like Emmylou Harris and a lot of like some country artists, and he worked with Neil Young at one point. I think, of course, Bob Dylan later on with "Oh Mercy" and then "Time Out of Mind," late, in the '90s. But I think that had an effect on Peter Gabriel as well, because he kind of looked at things a little bit differently by working with this guy. By opening up the door, so to speak. And it was this less of this like artsy, sort of very stoic kind of music with this, these drums that are like layered in without any cymbals, by the way.
Yeah.
None of the drums on any of the previous 4 albums had any, he hated metal percussion instruments, meaning cymbals, any kind of like splashy kind of sound. He always had the drummers on the album, like just
play
very
rhythms
like
without the
rhythm,
cymbals.
just like tribal, very tribal type of stuff, very primitive. Yeah. And the music kind of reflected that. Here, Lanois like, no, we got to bring the cymbals in. We need to get that, the fresh air into the corridor here. We need to, get back into the swing of, especially if he's doing things like Sledgehammer, which is a more R&B flavored track.
Yeah, you need it. You need it.
Exactly. So we'll get to that in a sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's talk about a particular hi-hat player that was secured for his duties, which was Stuart Copeland.
That's
if you're
right.
going to get, if you're going to just to play
for hi-hat. Yeah.
Just for hi-hat, which is odd. Usually you get somebody to drum and it's like, okay, play the drums. It's like, no, we for Red Rain, we just want your hi-hat services.
It could be, hi-hat could be, you just kind of playing, but he knows how to like just really just, he's just all over the place with it. So yeah, you had on this particular track, you had three different levels of percussion. You had a drum machine, whatever was that Gabriel had, sampled in the Fairlight computer. He was using that, and on top of that, you had Jerry Marotta, who was playing the full kit, the toms, and those toms when they kick in, like in the later on in the song, god damn, and then of course the splashy stuff was done by Stuart Copeland. Even the cymbals, like some of the cymbal work was also done by him.
And then he ended up drumming on Big Time, but not in the way that you normally would think, because Stuart Copeland is a good drummer, but he seems to be usually a little ahead of things. And Gabriel, like, he tried out a lot of different drummers for Big Time, liked Stuart Copeland the best, but Copeland wasn't the best fit as far as like the timing.
Yeah.
So they just took snippets of his drumming and they pieced it together to fit the timing for what they wanted.
That's right.
So technically he's drumming, or it's his drum pattern or his drum sample, but it's not him playing it throughout. They kind of dip it in and dip it out, where when the timing matches correctly, they kind of brought it in and Frankensteined him in there.
Copeland has a very particular style. He likes to play behind the beat a lot. Like he just always, like, he has that laid back, when he hits the snare, it's always off from what Sting is playing on the bass. So it's like, so but it makes him stand out. In this case, no, it's like, you're not Stuart Copeland.
Yeah.
You're not, this isn't, we're here to do this. And, but I'm actually very glad that you say you like this record, because this is right up your alley in the sense of a really finely produced, meticulously produced album. It's crafted so well. And it remains one of my favorite albums of all time. It's just,
you know what it is also is, we have to talk about the music videos as well.
Yeah.
But what I liked about it too is, and from this period on, that it seems like he's not taking himself so seriously.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the videos from this point previous are all dark and like kind of, I don't want to say
Yeah.
sinister like that, but just kind of like
Well,
serious.
you can't say that.
But
I
then
mean,
he's
because
doing
they
stuff
are.
like
Yeah.
Sledgehammer, and he's
Right.
smiling and big time, and then even on his album Us, when he does Steam, like
Yeah.
he's just having a like embrace, not totally embracing the pop thing because he's still doing things on his own terms, but it's like he's having fun, and that's what I like. Like that was what I enjoyed about this album, is kind of like he's kind of letting down some of those guards of the
Yeah.
pretentiousness of prog,
That's right.
and saying
You
let's
see a
wrap this in
whole
pop. Let's
right. You
wrap it
see
in
a
pop.
whole other side to him, and he
Yeah,
is a self-professed. He has a self-professed love of R&B.
yeah.
He said his favorite singer of all time is Otis Redding, and that blows my
Sounds nothing
mind.
like him.
Sounds nothing like him, but it's like, but to say that, I mean, that shows a whole new side to the guy.
Yeah.
Like you think that he's always, he's into like these very sort of esoteric artists, but when you really think about it, back in the day, who was really like that though? It was Peter Gabriel who was kind of setting that standard.
Yeah, they
Of those
had their
kinds of artists. Yeah,
exactly. They
yeah.
had their
So
influences from whatever was there, but like
that's
we've
right.
said in the past, they take that and put it through their ringer, and it comes out as something else.
Yeah.
Or it comes out something different. And for I think Sledgehammer. Well, I think he absolutely benefited from the MTV effect. I did have the 12-inch of Sledgehammer, so I didn't totally dismiss this album. This was when records was still a thing, and I had the 12-inch single, and I think it was the first song on one of my mixtapes, which I still may have. I'll have to dig it out. But the MTV effect, this became this won 9 MTV Music Video Awards, the most ever. Okay, so I think that's what brought, in 85, 86, the MTV effect was in full swing. So once this video caught on, and just because of how innovative it was, also wasn't like a performance video, and that's what you get. That's where you get the artsiness of Gabriel. It was a lot of like, they took individual pictures and made it into, when you run it fast, it looks like choppy footage, and then you got the dancing chickens. There's claymation. It's just a fun, innovative video that was tailor-made for people to grab onto, like this quirky thing. And then all of a sudden, Peter Gabriel kind of rose, like thanks to it's thanks to MTV, because I don't think Sledgehammer on its own would have hit number one without it being totally in heavy rotation on MTV. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the song kind of stood on its own, but I mean, but the advent of the video, which took 2 weeks to make, by the way, the Aardman Studios, who does very, very
Wallace
famous
and Gromit.
Wallace and Gromit, that claymation animation, did pretty much most of the work on this video, and it's all in camera. There's no CG at this point in time, so it's very, very creative and very effective, and it was very well done, and it was fun. It was a fun video because it reflected the song. It was very, the song itself is, has a lot of
very sexual connotations.
Yeah, exactly.
But
and
you got to pick it up. It's tongue in cheek.
It's very, very much is, and but it has that R&B flavor, which he sought out Wayne Jackson, who is the trumpet player for Otis Redding. He specifically sought him out because to play on the song, because he was such a fan, and he did, and it really kind of put it over the top, I think, and gave it that less of a pop feel, they say, and more of the R&B soul flavor that he was looking for. And then
you just got that bass, just kind of that liquidy bass from Tony Levin, just kind of kind of like really just funk. Really kind of in the pocket and just kind of dry, and that's what most of these songs get. You get this kind of dry, the bass is really driving a lot of the songs.
He layered that bass so, like, there was so many like different bass lines. I mean, there was one point he put a diaper on the bass, on the strings, to dampen the sound, and so you hear that later on in the song. Like the song starts out as very, very crisp and very sharp, and then there's this the fretless bass comes in, and all. Oh my god. By the way, he was, if you recall, our top 5 favorite bass players. Tony Levin was definitely,
he made the appearance.
He was one of my picks, and if this album by itself is the master class of bass playing, as far as Tony Levin goes, and he's played with 500 like other people. But I cite this album. I always use this album as an example of his work because it's just so well done.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Absolutely.
Yep.
If you like bass lines and you like listening to, like Eric said, the stuff is well separated as well, so you can really kind of kind of just listen to the bass lines, and then you can go listen to the keyboards and listen. The songs are so well arranged that you can do it. Another big one, and it's odd we're doing this because she's cashing in heavily now, is Don't Give Up. And Kate Bush right now, as of the recording of this episode, is in a career renaissance because of Stranger Things.
That's right.
Because of her song Running Up That Hill figures prominently.
Good for her.
What's happening is because in Stranger Things, the character's listening to it on a cassette.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from her album Hounds of Love. That cassettes now are selling on eBay for like $600 of Hounds of Love because of Stranger Things.
That's crazy. Absolutely.
Is that insane?
Crazy. Yeah.
Probably couldn't give it away a year ago. So Kate Bush makes one of many appearances. She's been on other Gabriel albums, but Don't Give Up is one of made Eric's top 5 duets as well.
Mm-hmm.
As one, is one of his favorite songs of all time as far as duets go, and it's very, very poignant, very hopeful, very sad. There's a lot of different things because you're getting a point counterpoint on it.
That's right.
Of someone, is not, it had to do with somebody losing their job. You can
it's very specific.
To anything.
It could be political. It could be personal.
It fits with anything. And there's that hopefulness,
the lament of it, the way they, the coming off, the emotion of it is what gets me. And it's so, when they brought her in to do it, everybody was in tears because they were so marveled at her, it was so glad. Because originally, funnily enough, this is interesting.
Yeah, it's strange.
Peter Gabriel wanted to get Dolly Parton, of all people, to do this. And
I can't see it.
I don't see it either, but
interesting choice. But I think
Daniel Lanois would have made it, considering the fact that he did work with people like Emmylou Harris, and he has that sort of, he's used to working with people in that genre. So I don't think it would have been that big of a stretch for him. Because he probably would have made it work. But
Kate Bush is very melodramatic on this, and you need that for this song. You need that kind of melodrama that Kate Bush she brings that with her.
I always considered her to be kind of like the female version of Peter Gabriel, like it's very artsy kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
I also say that she's like the proto Tori Amos as well. She's very, very, like you say, very dramatic, but talented. I mean, she's that voice is, So I was, I have to say I wasn't I didn't know a lot of her stuff back in the day, but I did know that album. I think the album that came out in '82. So I could say that I was aware of her back then, and I only wish that. I'm hoping now that young people now, when they watch Stranger Things, and go back and check out the whole album, please. Just listen to the entire
selling for
record.
A ton of money, so hopefully
not just focus on the one song. She's made a lot of beautiful music, so definitely check her out.
Yeah, so she's got a career resurgence, and she oddly enough pops up on this album in a big way, in a really not a center. I don't think it's a centerpiece song. I think Peter Gabriel was with this album, I guess with all albums, but very concerned about track. We talk about this a lot too. Like it's going to be like a broken record, but track listings and track arrangement. And he was very concerned with it. And he wanted a particular song to be the last track. He wanted In Your Eyes to be the closing. He wanted to be the closing track. Mm-hmm. The thing is with vinyl records is, as you play it, obviously the grooves are really wide when the record starts out and the grooves get smaller as it goes in.
Yeah.
What happens is as the needle moves towards the middle of the record, you start to get a little more distortion and there's less room between the grooves for the needle to really bounce. Mm-hmm. And because In Your Eyes was such a bass heavy song, they said you can't put it as the last song because it's just not going to sound right. It's going to the vinyl won't do it justice just because of the nature of where it's placed on the album.
That's right.
So he wanted it to be last. Instead, it opens up side 2. But then when they would finally get it on CD or when they would do the CD, he was able to rearrange the track listing and put it last. But on the original vinyl release, it opened side 2, and everybody knows this song now because of Say Anything, John Cusack holding up the radio, and it playing, and and that was what, 89 that movie came out, so that was right on top of that song, like picking that song, and that kind of catapulted it because it hit number 26 when it was on the charts, but it became cemented in music history as like one of those iconic images of him holding up the radio and playing it.
One of the top, probably the top 5 and definitely somebody's top 10 of needle drop music,
Yeah,
songs. But yeah, I
it
mean,
was a
but
big
that
one.
song was huge when it came out. I remember the airplay that it got. It just all the time. And funnily enough, I never got tired of it. I never get tired of that song, especially. And I love the User Nudor's
Yep.
vocal on the end of it. They don't usually. They used to not really play that a lot. Like there was a version where they just kind of cut that part of the song off. I think there were on some of the top
Like
40
the radio
stations, and
edit. Yeah.
there's like the radio edit. But I always love when they cut into
Yeah.
his thing at
Yeah.
the end
And that
because it
brings in that
really
whole,
gives a whole flavor.
yeah,
Yeah.
you start to get these world music influences that are kind of. I went back, today I was listening I listened to Security for a little bit, and I heard some of that in there.
Hmm.
There was some kind of flavorings of it, but on this album, it really kind of he wears it on his sleeve. It really comes full front,
Yeah.
as part of the album. That these beats, these rhythms that he's constructing, all have that world music feel. It does not feel, except when you have, we'll take Sledgehammer and Big Time and kind of put that out of it, because those are straight ahead kind of like pop oriented
Yeah.
songs. But the other ones are all, they're more feel, and they're more like it's more of, he's creating like kind of a
A mood.
portrait. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a
He's
mood.
painting pictures is what he's
Yeah,
doing. It's like
yeah.
it's very imagery, the imagery alone, like it's cinematic in a way. Like I don't particularly think of anything in, like what does this mean? Like lyrically, he's just when it's Red Rain, for example, he had a dream. I think the song was about a dream that he had where um there was like a parting of like the Red Sea, like there was like an ocean like parting, and then like you had like these human shaped glass bottles, and each of the glass bottles was being like filled with blood, and it was so he had to. So I don't remember. I don't think that was part of the video. I don't think they went that far to actually translate the dream into the video, but I do recall there were some like
Yeah.
uh, ocean waves and things like that. So, but when you hear the song, you think Red Rain, you immediately think of blood. That's the first thing you think of, and that's what a lot of critically, that's what a lot of people said about the song, and
Hmm.
that kind of thing. But it's so true, and you don't need to know that story about the dream to know to see that in your head.
Yeah.
When you listen to the song,
Yeah, and his
and
lyrics are pretty much to the point. He kind
right,
of, he doesn't really. I don't think he clouds his stuff. I mean, he's clever with his lyrics, but it's there. It's not hard to discern.
hmm
And like you
well,
said,
it's
yeah,
open for
he's kind of
interpretation. Yeah,
it's word imagery that he does.
yeah,
Which again is kind of it's a part of the makeup of these songs. Like you said, some of them are very atmospheric
hmm
and kind of mood setting. And it's just those beats that do it. It's just having these kind of like rhythm, repeating rhythm beats that kind of go like set the song up, and then there's some keyboards will come in, and then his vocal will come in, and then he'll just kind of unfurl the story for you.
yeah,
I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't know what to expect out of the other songs.
hmm
I knew all the, Big Time and all that kind of stuff, but it was good to revisit it too, because I took a lot of that stuff for granted, like Big Time. I'm like, oh, okay, it's, but then I was watching the music videos again, and he's just having a
yeah,
good, like,
yeah,
he's not taking it seriously, which made it easier for me to then go back and I listened to the album like I don't know, 4 or 5 times easily.
oh
But it
yeah,
was easy to just kind of go back and
it's
listen
not
to it
hard.
again, because he was just really enjoying it. And yeah, it's not a very long album. It's only 8 songs, and 5 were hits. So
I think every song,
jump in and do the
yeah,
rest.
I absolutely. I think every song is just impeccably done, and it's just such a masterpiece.
Yeah,
What
Mercy Street, I really
Mercy
like.
Street?
Just
Oh my goodness, that is like I like saying the word sublime.
yeah,
There you go.
there it is.
That is an absolutely gorgeous song, and I love his vocal on that song. It just gives me chills every time especially when he comes in with that low end vocal, which another story and ironic. It's just he can't sing that low.
Yeah.
He can't normally do that. Like like during the day, like so what he would do is like stay up all night pretty much in the studio, work up the song, and then come in and back into the studio like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, And when you wake up, you just get out of bed and you have that morning voice, like your voice is always lower. He recorded the song that way. He came in and did that vocal because of that voice, and he nailed it.
There you go.
And it just it's
you got to
so
do what you got to
effective.
do.
And he's not used to. And again, like this was like one of the first efforts where you hear a lot of harmonizing with himself, and it opened up my ears in terms of it made me. His voice he's probably one of my favorite singers now because of this album.
Yeah.
Before, like the stuff he did before, it was just weird. It was just he would do these weird like yells and
peculiar music. Yeah.
Right. But here it's like the vocal is actually used to great effect in the harmonies and
I think he really came into his own.
We talked about Fallen Angel when Robbie sings his thing, and I think he's actually trying to emulate. I honestly think he's trying to emulate Peter Gabriel on that song.
Oh, yeah. When you listen to Fallen Angel, yeah, absolutely. It is him listening to So and saying, I want to do something along those lines.
But then Gabriel comes in with that overlying, like that vocal, outshines Robbie, and it just takes it to a whole new level. Oh,
yeah, God, and know immediately that is Gabriel. I mean, it's like And actually, in the lyric is "Come down, Gabriel, and blow your horn."
And blow your horn,
but not.
That's right. Yeah,
he didn't mean Gabriel. He meant the angel. He didn't mean the Peter. But he was on that song flattery, right? Not. He wasn't stealing. He was impressed by that, and was trying. Because he certainly can't sing like Peter Gabriel, Robbie Robertson. There's nothing wrong with that. It's one Peter Gabriel.
No, he's got a very unique.
That's all we need. Yeah,
vocal, but it's almost a shame because I wish Robbie could have been the reverse, because he could have came in and did some of those lower end vocals. Like he's got that like gravelly kind of voice, and it would have been interesting to see.
He was late to the game. He didn't hook up with Lanois until afterwards, and then but it was good. Like again, I like that cross pollination when you. And he was. It's not like Lanois was introducing people to him. It's like Lanois had to leave and go work with U2, and then Robbie Robertson flew out there, had some scraps of music, and then they ended up doing a song there, and then flew out to England. Yeah, let me find Peter Gabriel and see if he can help. So, and that was again because of this, which was really neat. Now I've got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Because let's kind of go back to the Genesis thing, actually, right? Because
okay.
Like we said in the beginning, Sledgehammer hit number one, and it knocked Invisible Touch, the single, off the number one perch that Genesis occupied, and that was their only number one. That is kind of really strangely ironic that that the band that he was in and the band that became popular after him leaving, both have a surgence, a career revival, as it were, on the pop charts, not just in rock and being popular, but on the pop charts, where neither one of these bands ever resided. Like Gabriel never was even like touched like the top 40 or top 30. And Genesis was on the rise, but Invisible Touch was like the pinnacle of the Phil Collins like oversaturation.
Yeah.
And they collide, literally collide at number one.
Yeah.
Is just, I think that's just strangely astounding. It's just a weird stat.
Is. It really is. And like I said before, as much as I love, for me, the period where Phil first took over on vocals and those few albums up to probably, I would say 82, 83, I kind of draw the line there, because that's when, Phil became like the big, like you say, he's oversaturated. And I just don't think that the music on Invisible Touch didn't do it for me. I didn't like the fact that they became that poppy and more when Phil started actually writing songs for Genesis. There really wasn't much of a departure from his solo work.
Yeah, the lines got blurred.
The lines got blurred, and people were just like, oh, there's no difference here. It's like, and that's a shame, because the richness of what they used to do was completely lost, and now you're just dealing with these and not to say that there are a few good songs on Invisible Touch. I love stuff like, I still like songs like Into Deep, and I like, that's a really nice ballad. I really like Throwing It All Away. That's a nice song. I like Domino. That's like the long song on that particular record.
Yeah, they would always have like they would always throw a bone to the prog people, like
thing. Exactly.
Like they would always try and like kind of keep them at bay with as the albums got more poppy. they would try and like retain it, but they also said, you know what, we're open to doing this too. It's like, why can't
Yeah.
we make shorter songs, but still, there
Right.
were another one like, why can't we make shorter songs but still be
Simpler,
Genesis?
much
You know,
simpler. Yeah.
there was the bleed through of the Phil Collins effect where he's just writing songs. So
Hmm.
it could be on a, depending on when he's recording, it could be a Phil Collins song, it could be a Genesis song. And that's, we'll leave that there, but that's kind of where they intersected. But what I was getting to was there had always been rumors of Gabriel, like, returning to Genesis. They were going to, in the 2000s, I think they were talking about
Yeah.
mounting, doing The Lamb Lies on Broadway as a
Yeah.
tour, and
Yeah.
bringing that out. And they could never get it. And the closest they got was, I guess, on Genesis, they had a greatest hits album, and him and Phil sang on Carpet Crawlers, what,
Yeah.
99, I think it was
Yeah.
called.
It was.
Do you was that because now it's a missed opportunity. Now it's not going to happen now with the state of Phil
Course.
Collins, unfortunately. I don't think Gabriel would go out with Genesis without Phil Collins, because then it would seem like kind of icky.
Yeah.
But I because they were not on bad terms. They
They
it's not
weren't.
like they hated each other or anything. They just went different ways, and
They
it was
really
okay.
did, and I don't really think that Gabriel was ever really interested in doing a reunion. It just wasn't something that he was just terribly interested in.
Mm-hmm.
He was so far removed from that time, and that
It was a lifetime. Yeah, literally a lifetime
and
ago.
that material. I mean, let's face it. I mean, they changed. I mean, they radically changed. So he wasn't interested in going back and I think revisiting that stuff. That being said, however, he did go out on tour with Sting. Okay.
Okay.
And I saw a clip on YouTube, and this was it was called the Rock Paper Scissors Tour. Okay. So they performed together. Sting would do several of Peter Gabriel's songs. Gabriel would do some Sting songs. So when I saw Sting step up to the mic and sing the first two lines of Dance with the Moonlit Night from Selling England by the Pound, I was blown away. I was like, is that Sting singing a Genesis song? That's crazy.
Yeah.
So he does, so Gabriel was still, but
he
I
doesn't
think
discount. He doesn't discount the music.
But what was Sting chose the song.
Yeah.
I think it was a matter of them choosing each other's songs that they wanted to do. It wasn't Gabriel's. He doesn't do these songs in concert. Yeah. I don't think. I really don't think he does. But the only time that I really wish that I could have, and they never released it officially. I wish they would, because they pretty much released everything else, video wise. And, there's so many like V8, like the VHSs that I used to have, like Three Sides Live and the Mama tour and all the, but the one thing they never released officially was the concert that they actually did reunite on, which was the WOMAD Festival in '82, where they played the Milton Keynes Bowl in England, and it was raining and pouring that day. It was like in a stadium, and they did reunite. It was Gabriel came out with and they still had Chester Thompson and Daryl Sturmer, and they were doing songs from Abacab, and it was during that tour. And then they broke into like part of the Lamb. They didn't do the whole album, but they did a lot of the songs from that and a lot of their older material. And then they brought out Steve Hackett. Wow. And he came back, and that was a full-on reunion. And I was always hoping for that. And I always said that even in this most recent tour with Phil, sadly, just not being able to do anything but just sit on a stool.
Yeah.
And I just remember the energy that he used to have. And it was it makes me so sad to see him in this state.
He was a beast. He was. He was a
you
he
remember,
gave it all.
You saw,
yeah.
I mean,
saw him multiple times. He would give it all. You can't ever take that away.
The energy that he had.
And when you look at clips of Peter Gabriel concerts, Jesus Christ, he's riding a bike around the stage. They're all jumping up and down at the same time. They're all wearing the dusters, and it would have been fun to see one of those concerts, because it seems like it was just an event and a gathering.
I agree.
Because he was so into creating that immersive experience with the crowd, and I was watching. I forgot. I think there's so many different clips, but like he's singing like Sledgehammer or whatever, and he's riding a bike, or they would do it in the round,
and that's
so would have a round stage and riding around, and people are they're playing and doing everything, and
so you have the song, right? They work it up in the studio. You have the music video, which is this claymation weird thing. And then you got the live performance, which is something completely different.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're using imagery from the music video necessarily. He's doing three completely separate experiences, like different mediums, and interpreting the song in three different ways in a way. So that's cool. I always loved. He's always trying to do things differently, and he's.
Yeah, does a lot of charity work. Very, very political. He very socially conscious, and
I would argue
gives a lot of time to charities as well.
I would argue that he was doing it way before Live Aid, before like Band Aid even was a thing.
The song Biko. That was from what, 82, right?
80,
or was that even
80,
before that?
No, 80.
Yeah.
So he was very much into apartheid and all that kind of thing. And he was doing stuff like like WOMAD Fest, like world music is a thing. Like he likes to bring in artists from other countries, and he started a new record label called Modern Records, or is it Yeah, I think it's Modern Records, and he actually re-released all of his releases on that label. So now, like the remastered versions of these like vinyl and stuff, they're on that label now. They're no longer I don't think no longer Geffen releases. Like he actually,
he's got everything reverted back
catalog. Yeah. So, which is amazing,
There you go. So I think, I think that's going to do it for I think the amazing world of Peter Gabriel. Honestly, he's very, very much a chameleon in his careers. And if you go look at early Genesis photos, he would shave a V into his forehead. Just like really creepy stuff, and he kind of went through that period. Then he kind of came out and was doing
that was my punk rock, man. That was the music that I disappeared into my room, turned off the lights, put the headphones. That was my because it was so weird. I liked it. The weirder it was, I liked it. And I used to drive my family crazy, like blasting this stuff, like my mom, my grandmother out there gardening in the backyard. My window's wide open because my bedroom was right there, and I put this stuff out of there. What the hell are you listening? What is that? What?
And then on the other side of town in Dobbs Ferry, New York, Dean is listening to the Village People. Right?
I think we were a little beyond that.
It was a little after. Okay.
No, I think you had to have been listening to Jeff Lynne.
Okay. By then, all right. Fair enough. The Village People is the secret before ELO is the Village People. Was everything to me. Anyway, a story for another time.
Yep.
But that's going to do it for this one. I mean, absolutely check this album out. It is his biggest selling album ever. It is a milestone record, not only in 86, but of music of the 80s. It is highly regarded as one of the best albums of the 80s, bar none, just because of also what he was able to achieve of breaking out of this strange prog mold and making something that was still kind of true to it, but also very accessible to the layman like me. Not the fan like Eric is going to be there for it no matter what. Mm-hmm. And he's going to enjoy it probably more because he sees the progression of the artist. But then for the casual listener, he just opened himself up to a whole other audience that he gained. And that was, I'm sorry, I didn't listen to it as much or at all. I knew the hits, but I checked it out now. So I encourage you to join me with it and have a new discovery of some music. And again, that's what I love about this podcast. There's albums that Eric hadn't totally checked out. And there's ones that I'm doing too. So we're learning it and experiencing and giving you our takes on it as they're happening, which is really a lot of fun. So this one was a good one. A great one for me to listen to because I loved how well produced it was as well. That kind of gets me in the ear candy right there of listening to a nicely produced album.
This is
high marks for that.
I think this is the album that actually inspired me to learn audio engineering, like to go to school and because it came out around exactly that time that year. So next thing because of I'm not going to say anything more. I don't want to start gushing, which we always do with stuff we're excited about. So but on the other hand, we'll just leave it at that.
We'll leave it there. Definitely check it out though. It's on Spotify. Yeah. There's a 25th anniversary edition. There's a 2012 remaster.
Yeah.
They did redo the track listing. So if you want to hear how we meant it, I actually made a playlist of what the original track listing was, just so I could get a feel for it and listen to it that way. Either way, you're not going to go wrong with Peter Gabriel. Great music from the 80s. Not the 80s stuff that you usually think of when you think of 80s music. So that'll do it for the 3324 podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this musical excursion that we take every week. We appreciate you checking in and seeing how we're doing. We hope you're doing well also. We do live shows every other Wednesday, so come and see the ugly mugs, gawk, point, laugh, whatever you want to do, or interact. We have a lot of fun. Do any or all of those things. We look forward to seeing you there and meeting you and interacting. And that's going to do it. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.